good?
I apologize for that. My computer just decided to take a massive shit. So
okay, that explains the part where you said, "Oh my god."
I was like, is everything okay? Like, I see you two talking, but I'm not hearing anything, so I just backed out really fast. So I'm so sorry. Can you just take that from the top?
Yeah. Okay. So talking about resources, there's a little bit of difficult sharing resources when it comes to like a persecuted minority group, which is that you want to share it to people who you know are going to benefit from it, and you want to give it to as many of those people as possible. But if you make it like super public, then there's the possibility of it being flooded with bad shit. And
okay, that I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I try to be a little bit careful about that.
I understand. Okay.
I think my recommendation for people right now is mostly thinking locally and trying to reach out to like local trans people that they know and like any local LGBT like organizations that they know of, or even like gay bars might be a place to start to like find people who can help you find access to your medication, for example. And that's one of the things that I've been focusing on the last couple of days is, yesterday I had a meeting at the local LGBT organization in my town. I just wanted to check, is everything like still sounding okay?
Oh yeah, you sound right. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Not only do you sound great, but the things that you're saying sound great as well.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
I opened the doors there last night, and we had about a dozen people show up, and I was able to give people some ideas of like how they might continue to access care, even if like worst comes to worst. And you've probably seen people share memes that say "be gay, do crime," and I think a lot of people don't realize that like it's not a fucking meme. Like, for queer people to survive and be happy and healthy, a lot of the time we have to do shit that's not legal. And of course, like, another reason why it's a little bit difficult to share resources is because sometimes they're not legal resources. Like, it's scary for trans feminine people already, like accessing estrogen when you're not prescribed estrogen, it's going to be expensive. It's potentially going to be dangerous. Like, you can't, everybody doesn't have like access to like materials to test like the quality of estrogen that they got off of some random person on the internet. Like, injecting stuff that you didn't get from a pharmacy is really scary. Like, nobody wants to have to do that, obviously. But it's like extra tricky and extra burdensome and dangerous for transmasculine people who need access to testosterone, because testosterone is a controlled substance. So, trans women, it's considered like a gray market. If trans women order estrogen and anti-androgens from somewhere, like the worst case scenario, customs might throw it in the trash. They're probably not going to get fined or anything usually either. And they're definitely not going to go to prison for it. But for transmasculine people, like, we could go to prison for accessing medication that we need to be safe and healthy. So that's
I didn't realize that there was a difference in terms of the regulations of both of these hormones. Like, because I've heard how, in many ways, like, you could technically, I mean, it's pricey, but you could get estrogen from overseas through third-party like online pharmacies, and that's how a lot of, I think, people have gotten access to that. But the fact that, really testosterone is seriously just, it's a different classification as a controlled substance. I did not know that, so thank you for enlightening me on that.
Schedule 3, controlled substance in the U.S., and that includes ketamine and hydrocodone, and it's just like, I'm pretty sure the reason why it became a controlled substance is because of goddamn sports.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a lot of things. Yeah. it has a ripple effect. So, but also like Oliver, I want to say like, no, like you're very modest, but I hope you don't mind if I build you up a little bit.
Yeah,
it's like,
seriously.
You've not only been like very immersed in this development or like very passionate about what's been happening. You've also been like chief facilitator when it comes to like a lot of things that have happened in the past few days. And it's not like you're like standing by the sidelines. You're actually making sure that these meetings transpire, that people are humanizing with each other, that people are exchanging resources, that people have access to solutions. But like a lot of these things wouldn't have happened without your involvement and without you being like the impetus, the catalyst for these things happening, which is like, that's what makes your contributions like remarkable as a person. And like as always, like I say that you're like as inspired as you are inspiring, and you've done that. So that's pretty freaking phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's true.
It's really difficult for me to like think of myself as a leader ever. It's not really like a role that I have very much experience in, but I do, when I see needs that are being unfulfilled in my community, where it's like people who are like me who are suffering because they're like me, and I have like the knowledge and the time and apparently the communication skills to like help like ease some of that suffering, then like I feel like I gotta do it.
Here's the thing. The people who are the best facilitators are not preoccupied with or concerned by things like status. Their primary focus is on things like outcome. And what you do is like, you are like ensuring outcomes. It's not about you aggrandizing yourself or you like, positioning yourself in a certain way above other people. You're making sure that people have access to things that will help them in the necessary ways. And you're just doing it on the basis of need. Not because you desire like recognition or anything like that. But that's like where like kind of like the best leadership comes from. And I think that you're kind of personifying a lot of that in this moment, especially. So you're just really motivated by not only what's important to you, but what's important to everybody else. And I think that's extremely admirable. And I think that you're just like a fucking amazing person.
I'll add that, look, leadership roles are never really assigned. They kind of just fall in your lap. And, you saw yourself in a situation and you thought that you needed to act. And, that's usually how the leadership starts. Like, you got to do something. And, this is from my perspective too, but it's kind of why I've kind of grown in kind of like my own outreach, is because like the sense of you doing something so like you don't feel alone, and that I guess in a lot of ways like doing something means like you feel like you're at least in control and like you are at least fighting back and responding instead of just rolling over. I mean, it's the little victories that you kind of have to look at and analyze.
I did want to say that like I couldn't be here like doing this without like you inviting me on here, so like that's really awesome.
Oh, don't worry about it. Like when
it came to you were like there like without being invited, and like you did the IRL thing, like you did the IRL Praxis. That's really amazing. And like this is important too, but it's like wherever the opportunity is, like you're there for it. So
something that's difficult, I think, is realizing how very like mental illness is very common among trans people, and a big part of that is minority stress. And something I've talked about with my therapist is a cis Black dude, and he he's a really progressive guy, and he's very aware of a lot of social issues. And, to the extent that, like, when there's bad news about trans healthcare, like what happened Thursday, I emailed him about it to make sure he knew, and he already was aware of it. So, like, he's really great. But something that's, like, a little bit challenging is that I think for queer people, the nature of our community separation is something that results in, like, higher rates of, like, anguish and, like, emotional struggle for people. You'll notice that, like, for most racial minorities and most, like, religious minorities, ethnic minorities, that you're almost always going to be born into a community of people who are persecuted for the same reason that you are persecuted, unless you've been, like, adopted. And like, I'm a fucking white person, so I don't want to, like, totally speak out of turn, but I think that this being born to, like, cis straight parents when you're a queer kid and not being born with access to a community, I think that negatively impacts, like, the identity development and the stability and, like, all kinds of things. Like, I think it does pose, like, a unique challenge for a lot of queer people.
You mentioned, like, separation in the community. Like, is that also, like, a reference to, like, like a concerted effort by, like, some people within, because I'm in this community too, but, like, the concerted effort by people within, like, within the community that, like, talk about trying to exclude trans people from the acronym of LGBTQ?
Yeah, like cis gay people. That's unfortunately, a lot of cis gay people sort of behave like they've climbed up the escape ladder and then pulled it up behind them,
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of how I feel about that too. Or even there, I mean, there's the whole detransition grift that I see from a lot of people. And let me just say, like, I think that detransition, like, is a valid choice, but the problems where I'm addressing this from is people, making a profit off of trying to sell and placate a bunch of transphobes who are hyper focused on a very, very, very small percentage of people who decide to detransition, instead of focusing on all the more positive impacts that occur with people who successfully transition.
Yeah, it's pretty wild because it's a fraction of a population,
Mm-hmm.
And something else that's really frustrating to me is, like, a lot of detransitioners who appear to be being paid to, like, get attention and try to use their experiences to make transition look like a bad idea. Something that's really frustrating to me is that making access to transition more difficult will not help detransitioners. It will do the opposite, because if we have more research on, like, the medical side of transition, which, like, to be clear, it's not experimental. We have really good data and, like, really good medical training, but there's always room for improvement. If access to like, research becomes, if it becomes restricted, like, that's going to be to the detriment of people who detransition, because they need the same type of care for their bodies that people who are transitioning need. It's the same kind of like, theories on how your gonads work, like what kind of hormones they're producing, and, like, access to things like permanent hair removal, or for another one, like vocal surgery. if your voice has been androgenized, it's very, very difficult to access because there are not very many surgeons who perform that surgery. Like, not many surgeons are trained to do that. It's like most people will have to leave their country to access a vocal surgery.
Yeah.
So
we're
yes,
gonna have to frustrating. And it seems like, so they actually, like, the research that I have available to me says that after receiving affirmational forms of treatment and care, suicidality decreased by 60%, and the decrease is more radical among trans youth, which is 73%. But 82% of transgender individuals have considered suicide. 40% have attempted suicide. But those are kind of basically the numbers that your attorney general is playing loosely with. I
would say that's even putting it lightly. I don't think he fucking cares about the numbers at all.
Well, but it's more so the reality of what's going to happen to the people who are directly impacted. Is that, suicidality among those individuals is going to skyrocket, and if things are basically consistent with attempted suicide rates, that's going to skyrocket as well, because the kind of care that was being offered previously is being denied of people now if the attorney general gets what he wants. And so the decrease in suicidality is going to evaporate, and especially in people. And that to me is kind of the unconscionable aspect of all of this.
Correct.
It's like, it's kind of where, like, even if this asshole who's an attorney general says he doesn't believe that women who identify as women are women, it's like, well, even if you don't believe that for whatever godforsaken, despicable reason, you're still getting rid of the one solution people have to be happy again.
Yeah.
Because by eliminating people's medical recourse, you're basically guaranteeing that people are going to be that desperate, that people are going to, like, experience that level of torment again.
It's
2% of transgender individuals have considered suicide. That's an insane suicidality rate.
Yeah.
And just by having the medical resources, it decreases by 60%. And I don't know. It's just, to me, to be comfortable servicing that to your population is something that just seems like very, morally accountable to me.
Well, he's comfortable in the sense because he's serving his purpose of fulfilling his constituent obligations to all these fucking naysayers and fucking haters. I mean, these are the people that really put feelings over the facts. I mean, this is why they're doing it, despite the enormous amount of evidence to the contrary. And
also comment on Oliver's YouTube statuses or YouTube videos without listening to the video.
Oh, also,
the fact the feelings, unfortunately, but people are captured by their biases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, what was that name of the? Because there's somebody in the chat actually want a copy of that resource on the reduction of suicidality. Can you say the name of the study?
I will bring it up for them.
Oh.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'm just trying to help out. We actually got live chatters this time. I'm like, oh wow, that's so sweet.
That's awesome.
I probably still fucked it up because, again, like I don't even think I put a title in this video, to be honest with you. I'm just like with the it's a learning process for me, but so far this has been definitely a much more successful stream than last time. I had a question because the attorney general basically sent the guidelines that a patient has to have had a medically documented long lasting pattern of gender dysphoria for 3 years. Is this just weaponizing the trans medicalist narrative here? Just moving the goalpost a little bit more to make to then the criteria being almost impossible to achieve gender affirming care, because to me it kind of parallels what I would see how the pro-life advocates would, make these stupid hoops and hurdles that like abortion clinics would have to provide. Like the room has to be a certain size of this. It can only have this color. If not, you're going to be fined and shut down. Like, do you feel like that's just done by design in order to move the goalpost? So there's less and less people reach a certain criteria in order to be, given gender affirming care?
That's definitely a really big part of it. Yeah. Like the inaccessibility is one of the main goals, I think. And David was also asking about like how some of this might be interpreted differently by different medical providers. And you were also asking about like, is it basically like the true scum born in the wrong body type of rhetoric that's being weaponized here? And to some extent, yes. And something that Aaron Reed on Twitter pointed out is that it kind of creates a circular logic at one point where it says you have to have something called severe genderphoria for the last 3 years documented. And but it also says that your patient should have any comorbid mental health issues resolved if they're going to be on accessing any kind of like trans affirming care. And that clause by itself is extremely concerning because most people, young people, have a diagnosis of like depression or anxiety, even if they're not trans. But for trans people who are experiencing a lot of minority stress and a lot of like intentional persecution right now, like a lot of us have depression and anxiety. A lot of us have what might be considered a comorbid mental disorder on our history, and it might be considered unresolved by our doctors. And so like that's one of the things that I emailed my the compliance officer at my hospital about to figure out like, hey, I have my state recognizes me as legally disabled by PTSD and depression. And so like, am I still going to be able to access testosterone? Like one of the main reasons why I've been able to recover so much from my depression and PTSD is because of the testosterone. But it's the new rule that the AG issued kind of makes it seem like if you have any kind of mental disorder, then you shouldn't be prescribed anything, period. And like something that you guys might be surprised by is, or maybe not, is that most trans people have like sort of read the writing on the wall and realized like my access to life-saving medication it's precarious. And so like most trans people that I know, including myself, like we have, and we've been working to make sure that we have like medication stored up in case something like this happens. Like something that I think I've probably told both of you is that whenever I had my hysterectomy, in an ideal world, I would have liked to have gotten rid of my ovaries because I don't need them. I don't want them. I don't want estrogen in my body. But I read the writing on the wall and I thought, this isn't going to be safe. If I get rid of this part of my body, I don't want to be in a position where I have no sex hormones to keep myself safe, like I was talking about earlier. So like I made a decision for my body that I didn't want to make because of like the looming threat of like exactly this happening. So yeah.
Also, like, found the source of it is the American Psychiatric Association, and this was based on a lot of data that was pulled from 2013. I don't know, like where I can share like the web link that has a source to all the studies, but if there's somewhere I can do that, I'd be happy to.
If you have it, Dave, I think if you have the video open, there's a chat. You can just drop it there. And
where's the video? I am boom.
Yeah. Hang on, maybe I can help you on that. Let me see if I can.
Actually,
Yeah, you have more hair than I do. Like here's the thing. Like how old somebody is like dependent on how much hair they have on their head. I am bald as hell. I'm like older than everybody on this stream. So
wait a minute. What's your age?
Oh, I'm 34.
I'm 34.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god! Did you just compliment me? Do I look younger than you, real?
Like impeccably synchronized. This is like exquisite, and all of it's like cohesion and all that stuff. I love this. But at the same time, if anybody does need the link, then there are actually a few studies that are referenced in the link that I have. But yeah, they're all from reputable sources. It's the APA guys, American Psychiatric Association.
Okay, I sent it to you.
These percentages. Okay.
I linked something that
sorry.
Foch has listed as a resource before, which is the What We Know Cornell.edu. It's a systematic literature review of all peer-reviewed articles published in English between 1991 and June 2017 that assesses the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being. So
that's actually a really good resource. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, it's very like easily digestible, I think. Mm-hmm. So
that's a real problem with all this, is just like there is a lot of information available, but we have this dynamic where we have all this information available, but a vast amount of people unaware of it. So that means like people like those on the right can, take just a tiny slice of data, even like particularly outdated data, pass it off as something new. And that just confirmed a lot of people's biases.
Yes.
This has like literally been happening since the 80s. We've literally, this is going to diverge a little bit, but this is just a point to basically like emphasize what Mike just said. We can be living the realities of Reaganomics 50 fucking years. Every day of our life can confirm the economic data about how deplorable and how unsustainable that is. And even though we live that like reality continuously, there are some people who are still, I'm sorry to say, like foolish enough to accept like the Reaganomics, like the configuration as like the ideal political solution. It's almost like, like even studies, like economic studies, have disproven austerity politics decisively and conclusively. But even like aside from that,
sorry, you're just right.
Right. But but even though like, the studies should illuminate these things in ways that are undeniable, there are still people who are fawning over these failed political ideologies, over these failed economic philosophies, even though their lives are the lives that are being endangered by these philosophies. So what this tells me is that sometimes there's no amount of empirical data, there's no amount of living experience that can dislodge somebody from their unfathomably stupid biases and prejudices, political prejudices. And that's why the data when it comes to transitioning, the data when it comes to gender affirmational care is indisputable. It's like literally virtually unimpeachable, but people still fucking argue against it. And the same way people still argue for Reaganomics, even though it's ruined their fucking livelihoods. Thanks, Reagan. Union rates are below 10% now, or hovering around 10% now.
Pretty
the
much,
living
yeah.
wage is this. It's thanks, Reagan. It's people's the middle class has evaporated. And even though people personally feel the effects of it, they still fucking support it, which is to me is should be unthinkable. But it's a very powerful indicator of how facts don't always permeate people's thick, mammalian skulls. So.
And there's also just the fact that people will lie.
Yeah, that's it. People will just lie if it serves a political purpose.
So my girlfriend told me earlier today, and this was really jaw-dropping to hear. She told me that she was talking to her dad, and her dad's I don't know, 50 to almost maybe late 50s, white, just straight Republican dude living in Missouri. He's dumb as hell. He doesn't have a degree, like a high school diploma or anything. Not to say that like you need these things to be educated, but he's just he's not an up-to-date kind of guy. So anyway, he has a trans daughter, and she's been transitioning for 5 years, and he still hasn't been able to learn a goddamn thing about trans people for some reason. And he said to her the other day something to the effect of, it's the Nazis who invented gender transition, right?
Oh, get the fuck out of here.
As
a history nerd, you should have put a trigger warning in front of that for me.
Wait, does he say like I identify as like a lampshade or something, or like I identify as like a gas chamber, like a murder victim? Like what the hell is that?
Yo, I don't even know, but like, my girlfriend showed him like, hey, here are literally photographs that were taken of Nazis burning down like Hirschfield's Institute of like sexual studies. Like, no, The Nazis were opposed to this completely. Like they were like more famously than almost anybody. I guess probably the Republicans now are only more well known for hating trans people at this point.
That's what you gotta counter with like
very strict homogeneity. Like it was like no divergence whatsoever. Like among demographics, like no, they were not like accepting of trans people.
You have to like counter just like actually, if you look at those iconic photos of the book burnings, a lot of those books were, the gender studies, the science at the time that they were trying to erase.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's about as intellectually coherent and like historically accurate as saying that like just because Hitler was a part of like the National Socialist Party, that like he like actually sympathized with socialism. When like in his own writings he said that like communism was the greatest threat to like contemporaneous civilization.
Not even that. Play the fucking the Nazi national anthem in English. There's literally a line where we stand up against leftists and reactions.
Yeah, and like Chrysler, like the previous inheritor of like the National Socialist Party in Germany, hated Hitler because Hitler would say things like, all right, they would ask Hitler things like, what is socialism? And he would say, like, I want everybody to like look this up on Wikipedia and like say like determine whether or not this is like correct or not. Like just like type in a definition of socialism right now. Hitler's definition of socialism is socialism is when people have bread on their plates. Holy shit!
Yo,
socialism. Hitler's socialism is socialism was when the government does stuff. Also, no Jews.
It's about as like infantile a definition as you can get, and also ahistorical. Basically, what Hitler did was he knew that socialism had like kind of like a populist zeal and appeal, and he weaponized the populist zeal and appeal of socialism to help his like his own political ascension. Even though he lost the fucking election, his last election, even before he seized power, he just like basically seized power because like he exploited a loophole and like some like dumb like procedural thing. But
I was going to mention how like very old and not experimental medical transition is that right now I'm reading an autobiography from an intersex trans man who had bottom surgery in I think 1906, and the name of the book is Memoirs of a Man's Maiden Years. And he used like a fake name. He just named it N.O. Buddy because like at the time it was not going to be like safe or a good idea for him to publish that information about himself. But he actually went to Hirschfield's Institute, and I think that is how he ended up getting bottom surgery. And we don't know the details of that surgery because the Nazis fucking destroyed it.
I was
supportive of it. It's like,
I was gonna say like there is a long history of being transgender through like this scientific lens, but even from a cultural perspective, like you can talk about it from a lot of this comes from a lot of non-white cultures throughout history, Native American Two-Spirits, there's a reason in Southeast Asia trans people seem to be more accepted because I go to the Philippines a lot. Take for instance, in their language, they don't really have a pronoun for like men or women. It's very neutral. And there's a history of, trans people existing in that country that goes way back. Like, it's just, there's cultural signifiers as well as the fact that you can study the science, which is not new, to show like this is not a new phenomenon. Trans people have always existed and will always exist. And it's not something that you can just sweep under the rug. In fact, attempting to do that is just going to cause violence and harm to people who, quite honestly, like the main thing is you have to show is like they're not a threat to you.
I went ahead and linked in the chat video by Step Back History. It's 40 minutes long, and it's there have always been trans people, and like from basically what I would assume, and like I can't imagine there being a society with gender and there not being trans people. Like, if there's gonna be expectations of people to, especially if it's just you have these body parts, therefore you need to behave and look this way, like there's always going to be people who say like that's bullshit, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that's shocking to people, to be honest. Like, it seems very like obvious, actually.
I don't want to learn, I just want to hate. Usually, well, I mean, when in that regard, it's usually these people, they're really only using facts and statistics just to like as a rubber stamp for their fucking bigotry. It doesn't matter if it's selective, information.
They're facts and statistics like decisively prove their standpoints as being farcical. It has there's literally almost no policy or factual precedent for any amount of conservatism to survive discourse in the last 50 fucking years. Whether it comes to social policy, whether it comes to economic policy, conservatism has been decisively disproven for half of a fucking century. And that's what makes it so frustrating when it comes to how people are either willing or unwilling to internalize new information. Is that we have things that have stood the test of time, quantitatively or whatever, numerically, however you want to measure these things. And despite certain ideas proving their failure, and despite certain ideas proving their success, people still cling to failed ideas. Just because there's, some kind of ideological, emotional attachment they have to these ideas or something like that.
Well, yeah, it is. It's just a subconscious reaction to the fact that if they were to embrace or allow new ideas to be challenged to theirs, there's the prospect of them, their ideas failing, and then they're losing their special status.
Well, they are, and that's why if they actually had to listen to anything that really illuminates the reality of something, they'd all be stuck in Dave Rubin's recovery mode or something. They'd all be in the rehabilitation station.
That's what
there's no reason for any of these ideas to persevere and survive. And it's but at the same time, it's if these ideas have proven their falsifiability so often, why do they still comprise such a massive contingent of the voting public? Why is it still such a debatable topic when the facts have disproven the debatability of the topic? That's what's frustrating to a lot of people, I think.
Well, it explains that part, and if you take a portion of that part, the people who are so they've made transphobia their fucking personality. For them, it's just easier to project your own internal fucking problems that may come about if you see a trans person existing. It's easier to do that than to have some introspection about yourself. I feel a lot of people, they're so hell-bent on doing this because I think there's a general fear their hatred is not going to be seen as a majority consensus. They are going to be in the minority in that sense. And then they're going to feel the sense of isolation and loneliness that, they want trans people to feel right now.
Right. Or maybe they feel like it's like the kind of like the final bastion of like their, I don't know, like their entire political orientation.
Oh,
Like what I think it's for people to like remind these people of is like we have the research for like, you know, trans suicidality rates. We have the research for like, you know, things like how it affects trans youth and stuff like that. Familiarize yourself with these statistics and deploy them mercilessly against people who oppose you and make them feel embarrassed and humiliated for like having the positions they have. Fucking do it.
yeah, and also,
because,
yeah, go on. Sorry.
no, I'm sorry, but it's just like, you know, it's if the research exists, then wield it and you know make the party of facts over feelings feel as histrionic and hysterical as they are, because they keep standing in the way of progress and prosperity for people that needs to freaking stop. And I'm tired of like conservatives and Republicans feeling like they're debate lords when they don't have the facts and information on their side. And like, you know, like when the statistics and the research contradict their entire worldview decisively.
It really sucks, like how, like, you know, this is all like, it almost seems like it's a fucking game for them. Like they're making money, and you know, obviously they give two shits about like, you know, who's gonna bore the consequences of like the narratives that are being, you know, propagated as a result of that. Oh shit, what was I gonna say? I just lost my train of thought. I lost it. Okay, yeah. Anyway.
Yo, if you lost your train of thought, there was actually some other stuff I was thinking about, which is so earlier today, one of the things that I did was like I went to my local LGBT org again, and we had like a little meeting where, you know, this had already been scheduled like several weeks or like months in advance, where it's just like we're gonna socialize and have coffee, and usually that like there might be some kind of bad news, like there almost always is. If you like go 2 weeks living in Missouri and you're trans, like yeah, there probably is going to be something. But you know, we weren't like prepared for like the panic and devastation that recently was created. And there were a whole lot of people there. There were a lot of parents of trans kids, especially, who showed up. And there were a couple people who organized a very small demonstration. So about like a dozen people showed up, and we were just downtown, and we had some posters. And we got like some like waves or some honks, like some little shows of support by people who drove by, which was kind of nice. But at the same time, there was kind of like this feeling of, man, what the fuck is a honk gonna do for any of us right now, you know? And that was like a really disappointing reality. But I also kind of realized like some of these cars driving by might have trans people in them, or like trans kids, or like queer kids who feel like totally hopeless. And like I realized that part of demonstrating, part of being like part of a protest or something, it's not always about like actually getting something done. It's not always about a material goal. It's kind of like showing your community that you're showing up for them. And yeah, like that wasn't something that I had realized until today.
It's like a fight of human spirit, like, you know. That's more important than people, you know, really consider, like, because like that feels like the willpower to continue on. So yeah, it's like every little bit kind of counts, even if, you know, your goal is just to like, I'm going to keep living my life. Even then, that's a revolutionary act of defiance in many ways, especially in the face of all this opposition, this like concerted reactionary opposition.
Mm-hmm. It's I feel like community sometimes is kind of underrated. I feel like, so like, you know, a lot of trans people act a little bit insane online, and like I think that's totally a true thing. Like a lot of us are really like sensitized and traumatized, and we can act pretty fucking wacky, and sometimes like I get this feeling where I'm like, fuck the trans community. Like, I don't want to do anything for these people. They're so like, they'll get so pissed off at me and like say something that I did is transphobic when I'm just like I can't figure out how they could like interpret it that way. And I know that like ContraPoints has like been a little bit open about that frustration too, where it's like she's done a lot of visible, like dangerous and difficult work for the community, and then she feels like she's repaid by the community by being hated by them. And I don't know, that's like kind of a thing, but at the same time, I know that I am only as strong as I am now because of other trans people. And even if my community can be like kind of bitchy sometimes, like I still want to be there for them, you know?
It's
it's
like
most to be is that, like, you know, despite like the flaws of other people, despite like the variances in ideological disagreement, it's like you can still basically fight for like a common theme for those people. And that just means that you're motivated and you're gallant about, like, you know, the right kinds of things, the right kinds of intentions. But yeah, it's Oliver, you're just like very magnificent. It's like, because like I haven't been like as active politically recently, and it's just like, to me it's so heartening to know that somebody who's like a friend of mine, and somebody who I've always found to be so impressive is like doing the damn thing in their community. And like yeah, but I mean, that's, everybody knows, like I'm sure like most of the people who are tuning in right now, they know you in some way or another, and everybody knows that you're a person. I don't know that everybody knows that you've already gone to like some extent to like be there for your IRL community, and you've like been actively engaged in what's happening in Missouri. So
I'll also say, like, people first got to understand that, like, you know, a lot of this is just from a very loud minority. Like, there is a bigger world outside of like social media, Twitter, even like a Discord server, and you just got to remember that. You know, that I've obviously seen it myself. I think it's just also the fact that, because like I've dealt with this. I was laughing not because I'm like, haha, trans people, but like, no, I like in the queer community in general, I do feel like I have run across people who are very like hyper reactive because they feel like their backs are against the wall, and in a lot of ways they projected that like onto me, because like I've noticed, as I continue being like some like public figure on Facebook, like I have a diverse like following of people, and oftentimes, like, you know, they don't always agree with the things that I say or post, even if I'm being funny, and I'm just like, I get it. What I try to do is I try to make sure that make them understand like it wasn't personal, and like we may not always agree on stuff, but one of my driving axioms is like just finding how much we agree on rather than obsessing over the disagreements. In terms of like, you know, I think these people also, like, you bring up a point, Oliver, of just like sometimes like you gotta go out and you gotta, you know, talk to people, you gotta hang out, like you gotta get off the computer, you gotta touch grass. I don't know, you gotta touch grass. You just sometimes I think it's also a form of like activism burnout. Like, you're doom scrolling, you're seeing all the news. I get it, it's real. But you can't keep paralyzing yourself just by, you know, reading the next news article, what's happening in another state house. You have to be a little more proactive in that sense. And like, I think you really have to need to question, like, is lashing out at somebody who, you know, has an audience, you know, really going to benefit you, or is it going to be counterintuitive? Especially like over like a said particular subject that you're disagreeing about. So I get it.
I also think doing work in person can be like very emotionally beneficial
Oh,
for the
totally.
person doing the work. Like, so like I can make a lot of information and get it out to like a whole bunch of people online, but like, I'm going to see like the view count. I'm going to see a thumbs up. I'm going to see maybe a comment if they feel like leaving one. But like, I'm not going to see their face. I'm not going to hear the gratitude in their voice. I'm not going to hear them say, oh, thank you for this resource. I have it written down in my hand and I know who to call. I know what to do. And like that feels so much more important than seeing like, oh, the short that I uploaded on YouTube last night got like 1.7K views for some fucking reason. And like, I don't even know if it helped anybody. You know what I mean?
I
Yeah.
think
If I'm a,
the internet is like a
I
way
didn't.
to meet people and connect, but you also kind of have to realize that there's still a lot of like it's still many ways realized as just a synthetic community. You cannot fully replace it from like the actual community that you would experience in real time when are out in public. You
And
just
that's
you
kind of
never,
like
yeah,
there's
you
almost
can't.
like an incremental like amount of humanism or humanizing that you can like expect from different forms of interaction. Like when it comes to like in like social networking or like text forms of interaction, there's like no inflection. And when you don't have inflection, you're like basically excluding a lot of like emotionality from your interactive experience from people. Then you get to things where like with like like video chatting, and that's like a little bit more like um illuminating when it comes to how like you interact with people. But like when it comes to like IRL practice and stuff, like Ollie was saying, um you do get like all the dimensions, all the aspects of humanizing with somebody as you're interacting with them. And as you're like, exchanging stories about your personal experiences, or you're exchanging stories about your hardships, you're exchanging stories about like, like the current issue that's like afflicting or encumbering you guys. So like it's I think it's good to like prioritize and to value internet relationships, because like I think, and like internet forms of access, because those things can be very consequential and those things can be like very actionable. But like for the time being, like there is nothing that can build a stronger sense of community, I think, and like actually like meeting with people and like actually sharing those spaces in that forum, like with that medium. But once again, that's something that like Oliver has been like, doing prolifically for like the past few days.
Yeah,
And he's
no, exactly. Yeah, and
killing it
it's
for him. It's like nobody, like, I don't know, like Oliver, like before you opened that forum up in like your LGBTQ center, like was anybody else volunteering for that, or?
I had seen people on Facebook in the local group saying like, "Hey, I think we probably need to like have some space to talk about this." But something that's a little bit alarming to me, as somebody who's disabled by PTSD and depression and hasn't really worked a job since like 2016, is that I seem to be a little bit like uniquely able to withstand like the emotional hardship and like being able to put the stuff together and like sit through it. Like, there's been a lot of times where like I haven't been able to do that, but it seems like trans people go through so much that if you know a trans person, they probably have like a lot of emotional hardships. I would assume that if I just met any trans person, I would assume that, like, for example, their relationship with their parents is probably like a really sensitive subject, and I don't bring it up until they bring it up. Yeah, it's just like there was a ContraPoints video where she referred to it was like a Christian person asking a trans person like, aren't you happy with like the queer community? Aren't they your family? And she said, no, the trans community isn't my family. They're like a bunch of hurt people hurting each other. And like I don't necessarily like totally agree with that. But like the point of like how much damage and trauma that like the average trans person has gone through is usually going to be like really significant, that like even though there will be a community need, a lot of the time we are so like downtrodden, I guess, that a lot of trans people are not able to meet those needs, to like do any of the work that needs to get done. And that's like really like kind of disheartening, I guess.
It's
Well, what does it require for like what's the requirement for things to get done? Like and who should that like? I mean, like I guess like
like an example of something that I started doing myself, like I saw a need in my community for, was I talk a lot about atrophy, which is just like a potential side effect of testosterone for transmasculine people, which is like vaginal dryness and like UTIs and things like that. Like can be like a pretty big problem for some people, but some people don't deal with it at all. But what I would see online and in person is that people might describe like symptoms of atrophy and they act like it's not a big deal or they're not really familiar with it. Sorry, did I like understand your question? Okay.
Yeah, like I guess it's like, so like let me make sure like understanding what you said before correctly.
Yeah.
Where it's like a lot of trans fam are basically encumbered by a lot of the negative realities that permeate the political ecosphere right now. That sometimes they don't have the wherewithal to be as combative or to be as engaged. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, exactly. And
how can people pick up the fight? Basically, is what I'm asking.
Oh, how can trans people make that happen?
Yeah, or no, how can so if like when I'm understanding it correctly, and it's like if it's just like it's a lot for like a marginalized population to handle, this in this case being like the trans population, how can like some like cisgender like idiot like me like help with that?
Actually, I saw a post on Tumblr the other day that was talking about this, and just taking like the cognitive load off of some people. Like if you have trans friends, especially in real life, if there's like, if you've ever had a friend in the hospital or like a friend whose like parent died and they're like not really able to take care of themselves very well, or if you've had a friend who's been like suicidal or something like that, like they would benefit a whole lot if you can be like, I'm showing up to your house and I'm walking your dog for you. I'm showing up to your house and I've brought a meal, or sometimes it can be the burden of research, which was one of the things I was talking about with the atrophy thing, is that sitting down and having the time and energy and the cognitive space to like read about body parts that make a lot of trans men dysphoric. That was something that I was able to do that a lot of trans masculine people did not have the space or energy to do. So like I kind of took it upon myself to do like the research and then like the science communication, even though I don't have a degree and I feel like completely unqualified to do it. Unfortunately, I've had like my own gynecologist tell me that I'm more educated about what testosterone does to gynecological anatomy than gynecologists that she knows, which was like devastating for me to hear. It's like, well, I want to be flattered, but that's actually just bad. And so like taking on the burden of research can sometimes be something that you can do to help trans people, because like honestly, with this situation with the AG a couple of days ago, the Attorney General making this emergency rule, I haven't seen Vosh talk about it, which has been really frustrating to me. Also, I just haven't seen a lot of people talking about it and digesting it in a way that is honest and beneficial to the trans community, especially like to people who are affected by the rule. And so, if you feel competent to do something like that, but it is a little bit difficult because like if you're cis and you don't feel, I don't know, it's one of those things where like I've heard some people lately talk about how like white people are often pretty silent on race issues because they feel like they're sort of like not allowed to talk about it because they're going to make mistakes. But I would prefer also for like cis people to be louder about trans issues, even if you are going to make a couple of mistakes. But like being open to correction is going to be a big part of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. You just got to give, even if like mistakes happen, you kind of have to, and I know this may be tough for some people, yet, it's, treat them like a toddler. Like they don't really know. And just like, you don't want to be so, hyper reactive that like they go into a different direction because of like some form of hostility. Because people think that way in a lot of ways. Like there's ideas and then there's how you use your personality and charisma to, articulate those ideas to impress on others. Like I was telling Dave, like this, like I think their last year I was talking about like, there's a lot of people I fucking talk to. They like want to like debate me and stuff, and like I'll be honest, they're very fucking knowledgeable. They're very fucking smart, but like I associate it with like an RPG game where like they put all their points on their knowledge trait, and they gave 0 points to their charisma. So like now they're stuck having this character that is has all this information, but is stuck with it because nobody fucking cares, and now they're just a prisoner in their own mind.
They also might like be very knowledgeable when it comes to like their own like political preferences and stuff like that. What really like determines whether or not somebody is like capable politically is like whether or not they have the arguments like withstand scrutiny from like other interlocutors in the political spectrum. But like even like when it comes to Oliver, like what you were saying, it's like within the trans community, I mean, like you said before that there are people who have like accused you of being like transphobic for like some of your standpoints and like your opinions. It's like when it comes to like I guess like people being able to ally themselves like these trans movements, it's like is it really that important that every person agrees in complete totality with every minutia argument, or is there a certain part where it comes like it gets bogged down in the narcissism of small disagreements, and it's just important to like move the movement forward despite those minor disagreements?
That's kind of the challenge with like, earlier I said like, oh, but be open to like a trans person telling you that you're wrong about something. The thing is like, there are a lot of trans people who are like fucking stupid and wrong about trans issues. Like there are cis people that I would trust to talk about trans issues before, like, I'd rather hear Vosh talk about trans issues than Blair White or Buck Angel, obviously.
Even though trans, it's just have like a different grasp, but you find to be like a little bit more like reasonable.
Yeah, it's just trans people aren't a monolith, of course, and just because you're like part of a group, this idea that like being part of a group means that you're like automatically going to be like knowledgeable and like correct and like virtuous about like about the group. So but it's pretty frustrating to hear. Like an example that I have is that I was listening about a month ago to like testimonies. I think they called it like whenever a bill is about to go through, they have people come up and
like
say,
hearings,
"Hey, hearings for a bill before it was being voted on." And there was actually a detransitioner who got called up there to be listened to. This was in Missouri, and so this detransitioner is like, I'm a female. I got put on testosterone, and I got rushed into surgery when I was like 16, and now I've detransitioned, and this was a mistake, and this has like ruined my life and shit. All the stuff that they usually say. And And so, like, after that person was done talking, like, a doctor came up next and said, hey, you know, this is extremely uncommon. Like, detransitioners are kind of irrelevant in this conversation, and they won't benefit from care being restricted legally. And what one of the legislators said was, yeah, but don't liberals always say that we're supposed to listen to women and we're supposed to believe women? Like, why aren't you guys believing women?
Was this Luca Hine? Someone's asking in the chat.
I'm not sure, actually. It may have been. Is that the detransitioner's name?
Yeah. I'm assuming that's what they're referring to. Or who they're referring to, sorry.
I think they said that, like, oh, I had sexual trauma and that made me confused, and that's why I thought I wanted to be a guy. And, you know, that's actually, like, also kind of, oh, wait, I don't remember what I was asked, and I don't want to, like, go on a huge tangent.
I can't remember what I asked. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But like, it was something having to do with like the narcissism of small differences, and there's something I kind of want to like point out when it comes to like, I think what is inhibiting and obstructive about the narcissism of small differences. And this is something that Mike and I talked a little bit about last week. Whether it came to like, you know, like the South Korean revolutionaries of the 1980s, or the Chilean revolutionaries of the 1970s, whether it was the Norwegian revolutionaries of like the early 1900s, any of that kind of stuff. These movements were only able to persevere because the narcissism of small differences was not a factor when it came to their political machinations and how they advanced their policy goals. The coalitions like consisted of things like university students, communist political parties, socialist political parties, I guess what we would consider to be social democratic political parties now. And I guess like what I'm kind of wondering, what I'm asking is, how can, in the modern era, we expect to make the same kind of gains that these revolutionary movements made if the narcissism of small differences divides us interminably when advancing political goals? And I guess like, you know, to what extent do we have to be able to stomach minor differences in order to achieve actionable outcomes for trans folk, even on like, you know, things that are economically populist, even things that are like, you know, like on issues of social justice? Do we think that like, you know, like basically the narcissism of small differences has been amplified and heightened by things like Twitter to where like it's like the left can't like congeal and collaborate at all? And how do we like kind of overcome that?
I mean, also like what, like in terms of like this differences with even within the trans community, where you have like people like Buck Angel who are like they're not like on board with this, you know, broadening scope of like transgender. They want to keep it very narrow to a very, you know, transmedicalist, biological reductionist viewpoint. Like differences like that.
And are they willing to kind of, even when there is disagreement, as past successful revolutionary movements have proved, are they willing to kind of unify in order to advance something that's like obviously beneficial? And to what extent should we like agonize over the narcissism of small differences in leftist spaces? And to what extent is it holding us back? That's kind of the question.
I know there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and it's like also kind of difficult to like put a finger on like what a good strategy is, but like the way that I navigate this stuff has basically been like I don't want it to be like in a patronizing or infantilizing kind of way, but sometimes I do just have to write some trans people off as this person is perhaps having a panic attack on the internet at me right now because they've picked out a small detail that like the way that I shaped a sentence is just a little bit too close to some like transphobia that they've dealt with. And like sometimes I just have to understand that that's what's happening, and I can't I can't really engage. And whenever it comes to people like Buck Angel or Blair White, it really comes down to figuring out does this person share the same goals as me? Because
Yeah.
a lot of the time, like, there will be those small differences where, like, I know that the trans person I'm talking to, they might be freaking out at me for whatever reason because they think that the term AFAB and AMAB are like, they should be like eradicated, where I think like they're useful in like a medical context. And we have that difference, and that could be like a significant difference for them. But to me, like, I back up and I think, like, does this person want trans people to have access to medication and surgery and like legal recognition that they need? Is that something that we share? Because that's the most important thing. Like, do we both believe that trans people should not be discriminated against in the workplace, or that insurances should not be able to discriminate us against us as well? And sort of just like, even if somebody's trying to engage with me in a way that's like very hostile, like backing up and thinking like, this person is like me and they actually want most of the same things that I want, and if the details are just a little bit different, we can work out those details one day when like the bigger picture, like the more important rights are secured. Like we can argue more about the little things another time. And it's like making sure that trans people are like alive and safe and not destitute is the priority right now, because like we're in such an incredibly bad place that like I think sorting our enemies from our allies is like fairly simple a lot of the time.
And basically, Oliver, like I asked the question, but like the way that you answered, to me, like when it comes to like my philosophy about like political change, like what you said is 1000% correct. It's like when it comes to the scale, it's like basically like, yeah, these people can be moved on like the same initiative. Like when it came to South Korea, it was about like dislodging their authoritarian dictator, and they had different ideas about like when it came to the minutia and stuff like that. But when it came to like the broader political goal, they all shared it. And basically, like the intricacies of their differences can be hashed out later. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for people to realize that there are some disagreements that they can stay out of, and they can still unify a broader demographic of people despite differences. And I think that demographic needs to be wielded against positions of power, or needs to be wielded against structures of power, and that the populations that are being wielded against can have disagreements among themselves, but they have to be unified behind like a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, I mean, kind of look at it this way, that because I can relate, like being in the LGBTQ community. Honestly, the only thing that you're probably going to have a similarity on is like this general history of just being oppressed and put down. And that's maybe the only thing that you might share a commonality with a lot of people. So I also kind of focus it from this way. Like, there's really no point in focusing on just cleaning the inside of your house if you're not preparing for a tornado that's heading this way that's going to destroy it all. Like,
that's a really good way to put it.
It doesn't really matter in that scheme of things. So, like, yeah, you said it well. Like, do we at least agree, like, hey, maybe like there should be protections against workplace harassment, just public harassment, just an insurance of like rights, so like we both can like function in society instead of like being pushed on the fringes where we have to go to extraordinary lengths just to survive. Maybe a lot of us have to go into sex work, and then like we have to then be compelled to perpetuate this like cycle of stereotype that trans people are some like sexual curiosity and stuff like that. Or are we just going to allow like people to use government to squash us as a demographic and therefore as an opposition to their power? Oh, I guess my mic is really low compared to you both, but thank you, Jarrett, for letting me know that. And he says hi, David. Yeah.
I love the hell out of you. We have not hung out way too long. I need the crap out of you. We need to convene, and we have like a lot of like nerdism to discuss as well as politicism. But if you guys know, Jarrett is like singularly intelligent and like formidable person, and he's just like a magnificent human being.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Jarrett. And thank God I can fix my voice in post. That's for sure. Fuck.
Post production.
Yeah, thank God if there's one thing that I think that I'm at least decently good at, it may not be, running the technical online aspects of live streaming. I love fucking editing those. So
we're gonna like post production Jarrett into like every aspect of this conversation. And like Jarrett is like the Thanos of this conversation, like hearing it and like inserting his like amazing Jarrett-isms and all that kind of stuff. Jarrett's amazing. I will never fail praise Jarrett and like watch his streams because he's hilarious and awesome and intelligent and engaging. So yeah.
Major hearts. What was I was gonna okay, so Oliver, can you like refresh my memory, because like there was an attempt in the Missouri State House to try and pass like a trans medical ban. Am I correct? Can you just like set that record straight, right? And it failed.
I think that there has actually been more than one. I think that there was one on minors that may have passed recently. And like something that I mentioned earlier is that like, like every 2 weeks or whatever, there's such severe bad news, or like even like every couple days, there's such incredibly bad news that I think a lot of like one of the reasons why this issue isn't getting as much attention as it should is I think it's kind of just gotten buried and drowned out by how much is going on.
Can I say a second?
Like a month ago or something, I was looking at like how many bills, anti-trans bills, are active in Missouri, and like a month ago it was like at least 30 different bills, and it's like I cannot keep up with this shit. Like I don't have a job, and I keep up with this stuff like probably more than like the average trans person in my state does, but I can't just like the sheer volume of it,
No, I get it. Yeah.
Oliver, I think like recently we've been like trying to like basically like determine why I think some people aren't as reactive and responsive to this as they should be, because this is like monumental news. But
I guess the reason I'm sorry, I guess the reason I was asking that was because like if it failed in the state house, is like this AG's decision kind of like a plan B option where they're now relying more on just direct executive authority to try and influence and shape public policy in Missouri with regards to trans healthcare?
I'm sorry I spaced out for a second.
It's okay. It's okay. The reason why I'll go on, David.
One thing about it, like I think what Oliver was saying about that is like in Texas, 76 bills were filed that were like essentially like anti-trans, anti-LGBT bills, and only one of them passed. So it's like I think like people almost like have this fatigue when it comes to like anti-LGBT legislation, where like every day they're like faced with like a new like anti-LGBT policy as being like basically like service to like like their senatorial colleagues and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're just flooding the media with it. Yeah, it's just so it's always in the headlines.
One time where like it's actually happened. So like I think there's almost like I think one thing that I can explain like why people are like a little bit latent to like digest and absorb this information is like we've been barraged with this anti-LGBT information since the beginning of January. There's like literally like I've actually written this down, and this is me like not being like a procrastinator. 300 bills targeting LGBTQ folk by February. And that's only like increased like unquantifiably since like April, which means that like I think that people have been like so barraged by this kind of thing happening that when like one of these bills actually succeeds, it's like they probably aren't even aware that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
which is like why people have to be like a little bit more like, like outspoken about it and be like, oh no, like this is actually happening. It's not like just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, like basically stringing together vulgarities and profanities on like the Senate floor or whatever. Like this is like somebody actually did this.
I think it's also kind of, it serves a purpose for like policymakers on the right to like just throw red meat to the base, but to also keep them like ginned up and engaged, because like there's a presidential election next year. And I know that they're going to want this to be kind of a deciding issue. Now, whether that makes or breaks them, I don't know, because like I also think that they're doing this because they are pretty much bankrupt in terms of like making like an economic policy.
Yeah, they got no policy. They only got culture war shit.
Yeah. And, if we were to use historical trends as a factor, they tried to pull that shit in the midterms with pretty lackluster results. I looked at the results and I was like, I thought there was going to be a blowout. But
it was glorious. That was a spectacle. It was amazing. It almost basically like completely erased my PTSD from the 2016 election. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
can I make a book recommendation real quick? By the way?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I mentioned this to David, but my therapist recommended this book to me that's called Love and Rage: The Path of Liberation Through Anger. It's written by a black gay man who is like a Buddhist teacher, and so like whenever I first heard Buddhist, I was like, oh man, he's not one of those like anti-violence guys, is he? And no, like he starts off like early on being like, I totally stand the Black Panthers, and I'm like, okay, good. And he talks about like there totally is a place for violence in like protecting people and in liberation. And so like I'm really glad that he got that out of the gates like fairly early in the book. But it's about finding ways to like, especially for minorities, connecting with your history and connecting with the strife that is afflicted your community, and finding a way to like manage the like pain and the rage and the like disembodiment dissociation that can come along with like all of the stress that you and your community is enduring. So like it's a good book. I would recommend it to like anybody who's like a leftist who's feeling like despondent and like having trouble coping with like holy shit, things are rough. So I think it was
it's good. Yeah.
Thanks, Oliver, because I'm always trying to find that balance between how applicable my wrath is and how applicable my loving feelings are. So.
I will put a link, like the Amazon link, in the chat.
But like even something that like we talked about last week that I talked about with Mike Rainey was like Erica Chenoweth's success rate and revolutionary examinations about like like which revolutionary methodologies actually produce like the best outcomes and stuff like that. And it's interesting to hear from multiple perspectives about how that kind of change is facilitated. For me, it's kind of like understand like there's like the very famous Michael Brooks adage, which is like be loving towards people, be relentless or ruthless towards systems.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of that I identify with. At the same time, when you actually examine how certain revolutionary movements were successful, it was not through kumbaya means. They made their aggressors and their oppressors feel very uncomfortable at the same time, even if it wasn't like fatal intent. It's if somebody who's an oppressor, if somebody who's an aggressor feels completely safe, then they basically feel as though they have like complete legislative freedom to continue oppressing and subjugating whichever population they have some control over. You really have to make them feel uncomfortable. Doesn't have to be lethal intent, but you really have to make it uncomfortable enough for them that they have to like vacate their office, or you get enough of the international community to apply enough pressure that they capitulate to the demands of like the weaponized public. So it's a whole last thing. But it seems like as like the modern era has progressed, like the what is successful in the modern era has become increasingly like complex. So, but yeah.
I wanted to ask a question, but before I could, I would have to ask like a kind of putting Mike on the spot question, which is like,
no.
I mean,
God,
like it's
wait,
a little
hold
bit
on.
personal, which is like, do you like ideas cis?
Am I? It doesn't matter for me. Like, if you want to use whatever, growing up, I've never really like cared for if I came off as girly or manly. So there's a gender fluidity to that, but
So maybe like gender non-conforming.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, you know what? Oliver, we'll roll with that. That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was mostly wanted to ask because I was curious how both of you would feel if like I'm trans and I share a lot of the same values that you guys have. But like I could totally have a dumb take about trans people, and like if it was dumb, I would totally want cis people to correct me, but like would you two feel like totally uncomfortable like no. I can't. Do you think you'd be able to correct me?
Well,
can you like that? Okay, here's the thing. If you told me that like transgender people aren't like, you know, even if they're blocked with like even if they can't access HRT or testosterone levels, it's not going to like affect their suicidality rates. Like I'd be like, hey, we have research about that. And I think it's all the famous like Shark Zero meme where he said that like he created like a visual representation where a minority demographic says something that's like completely insane. Like let's say like Professor Flowers level of insane. And they're like, genocide's okay. As long as like against white people. They're like, hey, that's still genocide. That's not okay. Oliver, if you said something like that, I would have to challenge you about that.
Okay, but what if it wasn't me? What if it was like some random trans person, or maybe even like a trans person with like a bigger platform? Do you feel like man, I'm gonna get like everybody's gonna shit on me if I tell this trans person they're wrong about trans people?
Here's the thing, this is I would be murderously relentless against them. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I think it's important to be like, hey, this is like information that's like, you know, been like quantified. This is information that's empirical. You might have your own presuppositions about things, but I'm sorry, but your preconceived notions don't matter in the face of information that's proven to be more helpful to more people, and they can suck it. So, but I just like would not expect that from you. At the same time, though, there's also the chance that like my presupposition about something is wrong, so I would listen. But if something they said like directly contradicted something that's been substantiated, then yes, they have to be challenged about like what they're actually trying to advance and proliferate. So, yeah, that's my position about that.
I guess for me, I would have to have like a kind of specific example provided, because to be honest, I haven't really come across a trans person that wasn't, you know, more knowledgeable than me, or at least on the same level in terms of like,
there are no wrong trans people.
So you're just talking like in terms of just like a politics, because I've run into that plenty of times.
You can't. 2 + 2 is 5 as long as you're trans.
Yeah, I would say, you know, you're wrong. And I don't know if you being wrong has anything to do with an attack on your identity. It's like, it's like criticizing, like, it's like for me criticizing Candace Owens, even though she weaponizes her identity, even if it's a detriment to her own, like, you know, community. Sometimes you just gonna have to walk past it, and you're gonna have to kind of bite a bullet if, you know, you kind of come off as like a dick. But it really depends on like what point you're trying to get across. Like, I don't know. I guess I've had too many instances of like being called whitey, and you know that it just I just don't care anymore. I'm still gonna say it. Like, that's fine.
I'm going to do a Destiny with you guys.
Okay.
And I don't like Destiny. Who's more correct? A white person who says that Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1967, or a black person who says that like Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1980?
Well, yeah, the white person's obviously.
How dare you, Michael? And you shouldn't have said that. And I'm a black person, so like you saying that is like, hey, you're like challenging my identity, my authority over like, you know, historical information, over empiricized information. Don't do that again. Shamed into oblivion. No platform whatsoever.
Shame.
You know, in that case, I don't know. I'd still do it. I guess I gotta take the L on that one. I'll be a sacrifice for that. Because they can't do that to everybody. So
and you take W, because even when like of course they're going to be like members of like a certain, like there's never going to be a monolithic consensus among any group about anything. And the most important thing to do is to stand up for what's most substantiated, and to stand up for what has proven its merit the most. Even if that means that you have to disagree with somebody who is trying to, like, you know, say that it's hard to disagree with me. Do it anyways. Because like, you know, I think the one thing that the history of science has proven is that like it's only by adhering to the truth that we create good outcomes for people. And that comes that also assigns itself to trans people as well. There's statistical precedent that says that adhering to the science benefits trans people. Adhere to the fucking science. By opposing the science, you endanger trans people. There's scientific precedent for, like, you know, when it comes to, like, you know, any kind of marginalized population, that adhering to the science benefit the marginalized population. So even if it feels like it's uncomfortable to disagree with somebody, if the science supports disagreeing with somebody, then disagree with them, because it will eventually benefit the person or the marginalized population to disagree with them.
I would also just add that, you know, even try and like humanize the disagreements. Like, we don't have to agree on everything for me to think that you deserve like rights and respect like me. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, for me, this is above like any type of like disagreements over political or economic issues. But I guess for some people, you know, trans rights, or whether or not trans people deserve rights, is a political issue, or it has become a political issue, even though it isn't. It's a human rights issue. Yeah, did I answer? I'm sorry, Oliver. Did I answer that in as best? Did that suffice as an answer? I mean, I probably do better. It's just
Yeah, that was good. If you had more to add,
I answer your question.
I like the part where you framed it as like remembering that it's going to be beneficial to that person to disagree with them, because like a lot of the time, like I would find it a little bit challenging, I think, to disagree with a member of a minority group that I'm not a part of, that I feel like maybe I'm not as like competent as they are, but I can see like a flaw or see something like problematic. I do feel like man, who am I to really tell them that they're wrong? Like, maybe they have like more information that I could be like totally missing here.
Can I say something? What's going to make it harder for them to embrace a strategy that's proven its failure, or to like embrace a strategy? And let's say that they agree to the strategy that's like proven its failure. Is that going to be harder for them than embracing a strategy that's proven its success? Like,
It's really cowardly, but a big part of it, and kind of what I'm asking you two about, is like
Mm-hmm.
the fear of the social punishment and repercussions of like when somebody's weaponizing identity politics to like prop up their argument. I do find it like really intimidating to navigate that, honestly.
It's just
Here's what you do.
I'm saying that as a trans person, so like
well, sometimes you just gotta separate like the subject from it being attached to any type of particular, you know, identity. Like when I criticize Candace Owens, it's not because she's black; it's because of the views that she holds. And if that's unsuccessful, and like the identity shield is just too strong, well, that's when it's good to have people in other communities that do agree with you, so then you can present contrary evidence to what they're trying to promote.
Always like there's the there's that video of Neil deGrasse Tyson rebuking Richard Dawkins that I always refer to. I think where Neil deGrasse Tyson says you're a new atheist, you've been basically promoting your view against religion for a long time, and it's very acerbic and it's very like just it's sardonic and disagreeable. I think one thing that's important when you're offering crucial new information to people who might be disagreeable is you offer the information in a way that's palatable to them. And if we're going to like name drop somebody who's basically the Voldemort of the left, Vosh, this is basically why he talks about things like super capitalism. Okay, because socialism is a bad word for a lot of people. But if you incorporate a word that's favorable to a lot of people...
Live feed got taken down.
I know. Yeah. I know. I'm fixing it right now.
Okay. What got taken down?
The stream. I'm trying to fix it.
Are we not live anymore?
We're recording, so like this is all going to still be saved. So
super capitalism is basically it's about speaking euphemistically about certain concepts. And I think there is something that's useful about offering new challenging information to people who are potentially disagreeable in a way that they might be receptive toward. We have a lot of people who are receptive to capitalism. We have a far fewer number of people who are receptive to socialism. And when you say like, it's like capitalism, but it's like enhanced and amplified. Like the people who love capitalism are like, yes, give me the steroid version of capitalism. What is that? And it's like, oh, there's not one person who owns a company. You all own the company. It's like, yes, fucking be on a track to that grind set. Give it to me and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it has to do with how like you present your ideas, with how like proliferate your ideas. And when it comes to disagreeing with like, people who are trying to woke scold you, I think it's important to find your spine and to find like a way of disagreeing with them where you don't seem like you're being triggered, where you don't seem like you're being like overly emotional, and you just like find a very succinct way of demonstrating what's falsifiable with their argument and what's justifiable about your argument.
Sometimes you don't really have to argue at all. And like, I kind of wanted to give an example of something from my life, which is like a little bit vulnerable to open up about. Like, it's a bit embarrassing. I think everybody's embarrassed to be like, here's my problematic skeletons in the closet, right? But so like, the things that I believed, it makes sense that I believed them because of like who I was raised by and my circumstances and stuff. So like, I guess I can own it in that sense, but it still is embarrassing as hell. But I remember one time I was like in my early 20s and I was hanging out with my family and I don't remember what I said, but my brother said to me just like totally stoically, he said, "That's racist." And he like, there was no like smile tugging. There was no like apology behind it. And there was no explanation of why it was racist. It was just a person who I looked up to and respected who was telling me like, that's not okay. And I'm going to let you think about that. And like, at the time, like, I don't think that I didn't think that I was saying something wrong. I didn't know that I was. And so, like, I think a lot of people have this idea that, like, oh, I need to do all this research and I need to be like an expert on this, and I need to know how to articulate all of these points and like these facts and figures in order to convince them. But really, like, it did a lot for me for somebody that I trusted and respected to just say, I heard what you said and it was wrong. And that's all I'm going to say. Like, I don't approve of what you said, and I'm not going to be mean to you. I'm not going to like disown you. I'm going to be patient, which, like, you know, like I'm never going to expect that out of my minority groups, especially where it's like, if somebody feels unsafe, like I would never expect that kind of like patience or like humility, that grace that he gave me. But like that is like, you really don't have to have a huge argument lined up for people. Sometimes it's just, I care about you and I don't want you to believe bad things. And like that'll shine through, I think. And it was only 2 words. It was only, "That's racist."
Right.
And I thought about it, and I, you know, was able to make big changes from just that.
But like, what if we were to like apply that to like any like potential accusation, and like say that like you said something and somebody was like, "You're a Nazi." Like,
it's typically like points like that where I just, you know, you got to then explore like, okay, what's a Nazi to you? Let's explore this, and I'll see if like, okay, you made a point. All right, that's a blind spot. I sincerely didn't know that. I'll work on that, and now I'm not as ignorant anymore. Or like, that makes absolutely no sense. I think you're using that word. I don't think you know what that word means. So like,
I think there are times where like somebody can like not have to present like the academic argument for something, and like they just say like, "That's racist," and they're right. But if like we were to like set that precedent and like that metric for any statement, then like I could literally accuse anybody of anything and not substantiate it, and they would have to accept it. Like I could literally say like, "You're a Nazi," or I could say you're a white supremacist.
Well, that's why
I didn't have to substantiate it anymore. Like they would have to like accept that and do their own research about it.
That's why you kind of have to like, I guess, you know, kind of have a balance when it comes to like criticism, even self-criticism. Like, you don't want to cave at the first type of accusation.
Yeah,
in a lot of senses, like,
right, or like discernment.
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of like, and I hate doing this because sometimes people think I'm being stubborn, but I don't know if it's just like my autistic reaction to this, but like, I'm like, when I hear an accusation, I'm like, okay, well, let's take a look at this. Like, maybe you are fucking right, or maybe you're fucking wrong. Like, and that's gonna, you know, doing it this way is gonna help me discern that. Because look, listen, I've been called out lots of times on some stuff that I've posted, and I sincerely take like criticism like at face value, especially if it's like people that interact with me a lot. Like, of course, I'm going to listen to them more than anybody else because I feel like they're coming from a very honest and good faith position. And then, you know, when you see the point where they're coming from, well, then that's where you kind of need to engage in some introspection about yourself. And like, typically people with a sense of humility will probably go, all right, where did I fuck up? Okay, I get it. So,
and like I've admitted to being wrong on like a lot of posts, but like Oliver, like I guess like the comparison I would make to you is like, you have that example where somebody said you're a racist and you like discovered they were right. But like, what about the examples where like people recently have said you're transphobic? Like, do you accept that?
Yeah, and just to remind me, what exactly? And I'm sorry if this is like a contentious, like sort of, it's not meant to be contentious. But I'm just curious, like, what did you say exactly that was considered transphobic? I'm just curious myself.
I think I've been called transphobic by trans people a few different times online, and like a lot of the time I'll be like, it won't stick in my memory because it'll be like something that's very bizarre and confusing to me, but like I probably like should have kept track of it. But like one of the first things that I do typically is like I'll go to my girlfriend who is also trans. And I'll be like, yo, does this, like, how could they perceive this as transphobic? Could you help explain this to me? And sometimes she's like, oh, I think they straight up did not understand, like, the syntax of your sentence. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes that just happens where, like, I'm misinterpreted. And sometimes, like, I don't know if you've heard this discourse yet. It might be like more common in trans spaces and might not be very mainstream, I think. But the last like year or so, I've seen people say that like the terms AFAB and AMAB are spicy misgendering, which like I can understand in some situations using those terms are like basically just like a roundabout way of misgendering somebody, like a PC way of misgendering someone, or at least appears to be politically correct and like not transphobic to like an untrained eye. But I think I've had trans people accuse me of being transphobic because I'm like, actually, I think the terms AMAB and AFAB can be like useful and important in some contexts, and I don't think it would be like useful to just totally get rid of those terms. And they're like, you're holding on to the gender binary, okay. You're terrible. And I'm like, bruh, how am I gonna like concisely talk about like gynecological issues among like a specific demographic if I don't always have like access to this language, you know?
So I guess like the thing is like, it's like, it's important for us to like really consider the criticisms that we receive and to be open to admitting where we're wrong. But I guess like it comes down to like, do we just accept every criticism that we receive?
It's like a Dunning-Kruger thing.
Yeah, there's a level of like discernment that's like important, because if we're really trying to like create like compassionate outcomes, and by compassionate outcomes I mean things like, you know, we're being judicious. People aren't being wrongfully labeled about things. People aren't being considered to be racist who aren't racist. People aren't considered to be transphobic when they're not transphobic. Like when it comes to like actually like delineating and determining who is like racist or transphobic, how much can we just like accept the criticisms we receive, and how much discernment should we abandon?
Well, I think earlier you were kind of talking about like how can we prevent people from getting just like totally defensive and like just like reacting in anger, and like I'm not a bad person. I'm not like that. And I think separating the action from the intent, or the action from the person, is like a really important step in that. I know this is like a little bit tangential, but it's like, for example, when my brother said to me, "That's racist," he was saying that the things that I said were racist. He wasn't saying you are racist. You know what I mean? And I think that framing it in that way, where it's like the things that you did or the things that you said, like not essentializing a person because of their behavior, I think giving them grace in that kind of way can help reduce some of like the reactivity. So like in your personal life, I think that'd be pretty useful.
Does that necessarily determine like what is or isn't racist, or what is or isn't?
Yeah, no, when it comes to that, I think what I notice the most is, like I said, it's like a Dunning-Kruger thing, right? Where like, if I'm not very familiar with racism, then I'm not going to be able to discern whether or not something is racist. So that's sort of just like the burden of education is going to be honestly like on, I don't know, like a lot of people would say like it's on the individual, but at the same time we know that there's a problem where like if we tell somebody Google it, go educate yourself, like they're gonna end up on fucking PragerU.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
So but I guess there are like certain truths that are kind of like indisputable, and I don't know, like it's like if somebody says that, like this is also something that like we've talked about like tangentially with like statuses, like when people invoke like my truth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like to me it's like when people try to weaponize outrage on the basis of their truth, when it flies in the face of what can be determined regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation and stuff like that. There, even if there are things that we can quantify, even if there are things that we can like objectively determine, people are still going to say you're wrong or you're right about something, even on those subjects. It's I guess like, man, I guess what I'm trying to like say is like, is it worth accepting bad information just because somebody says something is their truth?
Well, look, you should just take, if you're talking about criticism, like, yes, you should look at every criticism directed towards you, but like analyzing it determines whether or not you should fucking care about it. Like, exactly. It comes to the point, like, listen, I'm sorry, but I've had my runs on social media, just because of, you know, my interactions. I know I'm not going to please everybody. Like, I just focus on trying to please the most people. But, you know, I do.
Most people.
Yeah, I do want to, like, you know, check my own ego in this sense, because like you don't want to be this person where like if you built such a tough exterior against, you know, criticism, you then therefore just you disassociate all criticism, and then you're just a fucking asshole. Like you do have to kind of always show some humility and always, you know, take things from an honest perspective. And then, you know, the people who are criticizing you from a dishonest perspective, their whole fucking argument's going to fall short immediately. So then you don't have to worry about that. And then it's the real honest criticism that you can really analyze, and that can make you help grow as a person.
Well, I think one other important like distinguishing factor is like whether somebody's goal is to debate bro everybody into being wrong or right, or whether somebody's like in a position to like actually facilitate, you know, good political activism. And I think what Oliver was talking about before was like, you know, there are going to be a lot of different disagreements within like my community. There are going to be a lot of disagreements within the discourse, but I can like weather the storm of those disagreements and like, you know, still actually move against like common threats and stuff like that. And it's probably more like important. Like it's like there's a difference between somebody asking me like, do I want to like prove the legitimacy about the intricacies of my ideology, and it's like, okay, well, like I can argue those things, I can debate those things. But if the goal is to like advance policy, then I'm going to be less worried about debating every minor disagreement, and I'm going to be more focused on just weathering those disagreements, not engaging with every disagreement, and just kind of like
look, pedantry will be the death of you. Like you got to just understand, like I'm not going to hyper focus on this stuff. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to, oh God, what the fuck is the word? I'm not going to be able to please your pedantry on this. Like, if you're going to be this hyper focused on this minute deal, I can't help you. And like, maybe at that point, like a healthy boundary needs to be set. Like, because, you know, I do try to see bigger pictures out of these things. Like, you know, and that's just it's just the fact that and maybe this is like a personal thing for myself, but I kind of make sure that I don't put myself too much in a bubble. Like, I understand safe spaces are really important. I totally get that. But like, at the same it's like you can't always stay inside. You got to kind of go outside every once in a while. Otherwise, you lose track on important things. And like that, I think in a lot of ways is very similar to the type of people that you deal with online. I'm sorry to say, like, if you're coming in, if like people are coming in to this idea of criticism thinking like, oh, if I do this, like I'm going to be right and they're going to change your mind, you're going to be disappointed because that's not always going to be the case. It's again, like and this is kind of a personal thing. I have, met people who have engaged with my posts and I've talked to them personally. And then I make another post in the future that they didn't like. And now they won't talk to me anymore. And it's like, I was sincerely like upset, like, cause I didn't want like to personally offend them. And I literally went on my way to make amends and like, do what I thought was the right thing to patch up things and especially apologize. But even then, that's just not enough. Some people, it's just really passionate for them and they're not gonna, let you back in.
Even like, so like, I think my last Facebook profile I had for a much longer period of time, and we talked about this last time, Michael, where it's like it was more of like a watering hole, where like I even had like libertarians chiming in on like my Facebook profile, and there would be debates and discussions. But like that was evidently like too much discourse for Facebook to handle. So like my Facebook profile got like shut down because there were like, as Dave Rubin would say, there were too many ideas that were being exchanged, man. And like too many of those ideas were like volatile to like the Facebook algorithm and like the terms of service and shit like that. Mm-hmm. But like because like there was that happening, like I ended up losing like a lot of photos of like my friends who've committed suicide over the years and stuff like that. And like I just can't retrieve that old like
yeah, no, I lost my main profile. It got nuked to people who probably just didn't like what I said and like mass reported me. And I'm just like, you fuckers, you motherfuckers, you fucking had to do that, really? But I guess that's kind of like, when I look back at it, it's like, okay, maybe I should have just had like an alternative shit posting account if I was, worried about losing all of my memorabilia, my posterity. I still have to call Facebook. I don't even know if I'm going to get that back, that profile of mine back. But
I have so much like history with like friends and shit on that profile. But
I sympathize with you, and I'm sorry for your loss. I totally get it. It's just it's a major fucking bummer.
There's
delete your entire account, like everything that was on it.
So this is what happens. Like, I don't know if I don't know if none of that they gave you this option, but they give you a time to appeal, and if not, they nuke your site. But then they give you like a zip to download that technically has all your information that you can like save on your computer. Mm-hmm. But you have to like unzip it and all that stuff. They have to go through a whole process because like I guess they especially if you have a lot of information, obviously they have to compress that shit in order to send it all to you. So I've yet to open my file, but they gave me something to like. Mm-hmm. Here you go.
With me, they like send me a recourse. It's just like it's like they just like deactivated my profile all of a sudden. After I posted something about like Ezra Klein's debate or like his like contentions with Steven Crowder, and like my profile was gone. But like at the same time, I'd also been like more like visibly active with activism at the time, and like I don't know like what exactly like contributed to the deactivation of that profile. All I know is that like there are some friends I had in San Diego who were like way cooler than I was. Like my friend Bubs, who was a communist way before I was, a socialist way before I was. And I literally don't like have pictures of him anymore because of like the thing. And just like on a personal note, he was just a magnificent person who was as creative as he was intellectual, and he was exemplary like in every conceivable way. And I just like don't have access to him anymore. Stuff like that is like, fuck you, Facebook.
Seriously, yeah. No, I get it.
It's really awful.
So yeah, watch your profile, Oliver. Word to the wise, make an alternative one if you feel like the stuff that you're posting might be a little too spicy.
You know what's funny is like I'm in warning status and I can't get rid of it. Like I've read like, is there anything I can do about that? And people are like, oh, you just have to delete the original post. And I tried that and it didn't fucking
does it. Facebook is fucked up and they'll do that. Like I've had posts made and I've been flagged for, and it doesn't like this. There's a big error. Like Facebook will make errors in the algorithm about the post you make being against their guidelines, and you appeal it to it, and they realize it's wrong. But there's an error where they will not take off that warning.
Oh, I see.
Yes. So, and you can call, and like I've read forums like people calling Facebook help, and they don't give a shit. They're like,
that sounds about right.
So
like, it's funny because like the last few days, especially, I've been like straight up Fed posting. Like I'm like, hey, anybody got the AG's home address? Because I'd like to have it. And it like saying shit that like I probably should get like flagged for. But the thing that I got my only warning from was a few months ago. I said, guys, what video game character do you think I'm like? And if you say Alphys from Undertale, I'll fucking kill you.
Oh, right there. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I like literally say like murder himbo it all the time. And
there was a funny post.
Like actually doing something IRL, like he gets flagged for that shit like immediately, which is dumb because like Oliver is way more consequential, like the discourse of American politics than I am right now, and he's like way more of a badass than I am right now.
There's a post that's a follower of mine made, like making a joke like how, you know, he's such a slut for French bread, and I made the joking comment like, technically wouldn't that make you a French whore? And that comment got fucking flagged, and I had to delete it. So word to the wise, any type of like insult, because it was the whore part. So I remade the comment, and I of course put the asterisk where the O would be in the word whore, and no problems there.
Put the letter N in parentheses, so you're saying French horn.
Yeah.
No. Marks, stay the hell away from that. Also, like, guys, I actually have to get going.
I was gonna say, I gotta wrap this up. I'm sorry,
but here's the thing. Like, is everybody here? Like, I don't know how much we've agreed or disagreed. Like, is everybody here still friends?
I don't think did I say anything that pissed it?
Transphobic and liberals. Get out of my sight.
Oliver, I want to say it's nice finally talking to you in person. I know we've gone back and forth, so I guess I should thank David for giving this opportunity to finally talk to you. So that's really cool. Thanks, Dave.
Thank Oliver for being as exceptional and extraordinary as he is, and for distinguishing himself magnificently in a time of crisis when I could not, and he did, because he's fucking awesome. And Oliver is cooler than fucking literally everybody.
I was gonna say, don't be afraid to. I don't know if it's just like if I just present a persona of like not being approachable or whatnot. Just like, don't be afraid to message. Like I love chatting to new people and stuff like that. So and also like, you're always welcome to come back on here and talk and keep us posted on events happening, whether locally or definitely trans related news. I definitely want to make sure, like, because Dave and I are building something here. Like, I want to make sure that, we're covering this enough for sure. I know we had other things like planned out today, but I actually really like this last minute sort of change. I actually really like this. This was like, thank you for the opportunity, Oliver. The pleasure is all of ours on this side here. I
appreciate it. Like I definitely I want to get information out to as much people as possible.
You got a channel. Drop your channel down. Yeah.
So trans_cat dead.
Okay, that'll be in the description. So
if you want to find me like almost anywhere on the internet, that's what I use.
So that's the username you use for like everything, like YouTube, Twitter,
Reddit, and Twitter. I don't really get on Twitter too much though.
I feel you. Like most of the times when I'm on Twitter, it's usually I'm just like, what crazy shit's going on over here? I usually don't really engage a lot, unless if it's like if I see some like a really funny post, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna share that on Facebook and give the person credit because that was fucking funny. So
here's the thing: Mike Graney and our friend Oliver, they have their pages. I don't have a page, motherfuckers. You'll never find me unless I.
That's probably the smart move on your part.
Unless I dox myself again and tell all like the resident libertarians I'm throwing you off my balcony again.
Oh my god! Thank you for reminding me that I have to look at that past recording.
I'm not my first, my middle, or my last name. Good luck finding this masked vigilante motherfuckers, because like I am discreet as hell. I am subversive as hell. You're not going to triangulate my position, no matter how many like Clintonian politics you try to like deploy at your disposal. I am discreet as a motherfucker. Oh. In fact, I'm so discreet right now that I'm like literally going to leave the call and talk to somebody who I was supposed to talk to like 45 minutes ago. Like that is like literally like my political orientation right now. So like all of you guys have fun. It's going to be great and wonderful. Oliver, you are a masterpiece of humanity. Mike Greeny, you are engaging and like hilarious and personable and wonderful as hell. It's always wonderful talking to you.
Gotta have some positive points here. Okay. Well, he's gone. I guess I'll just stop recording.